It was supposed to be the most beautiful day of his life. The grand ballroom of the East Haven estate sparkled with gold-trimmed elegance. White roses cascaded down marble pillars. A string quartet played softly in the background as Manhattan's elite sipped imported champagne beneath crystal chandeliers. Every detail had been hand-picked to perfection, from the diamond-encrusted table settings to the custom cake flown in from Paris. And standing in the center of it all, in a sleek ivory tuxedo with his signature smug grin, was Nicholas Graham. A tech tycoon worth over $800 million, Nicholas had made headlines not just for his app empire, but for his high-profile romance with fashion influencer Chanel Monroe. Tonight was their wedding, and he was about to marry the woman he had publicly claimed was the only one who ever truly saw him. What no one in that ballroom knew was that Nicholas had already made vows to someone else, a woman who now stood pregnant behind those double oak doors with a folder full of secrets and a court order that would silence the room. But just minutes earlier, Nicholas had been on top of the world. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC's voice rang out, "please welcome the couple of the year, Mr. and future Mrs. Graham." Applause erupted as Chanel made her grand entrance. She looked like something out of a Vogue spread. Her gown was sheer, diamond-threaded silk, with a neckline that plunged as boldly as her ambitions. She beamed under the spotlight, clutching Nicholas's arm as cameras flashed. The press had been invited to cover the ceremony, calling it a celebration of love, luxury, and the digital age. Socialites mingled with influencers. Billionaire investors shared flutes of vintage dame with supermodels. No expense had been spared. This was more than a wedding. It was a PR spectacle, an announcement that Nicholas Graham had finally arrived. And yet, for all his money and control, Nicholas had failed to erase his past. Because what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly expect, was that his ex-wife, Olivia, had never signed the divorce papers. And more importantly, she wasn't just some ex, she was his legal wife, and she was pregnant. The clock struck 8:03 p.m. when the double doors creaked open without warning. Gasps fluttered across the room as every head turned. A woman stepped into the ballroom, her dress a sharp contrast to Chanel's shimmering extravagance. Olivia Carter Graham wore a structured black maternity gown, minimalist yet striking. Her long brown hair was tied back in a low chignon, her heels clicking against the marble as if the sound alone were a gavel. But it wasn't just her unexpected entrance or her calm expression that sent shockwaves through the crowd. It was what she held in her hand. A thick brown envelope, labeled boldly with a court stamp. The security team looked to Nicholas. He froze. His smile faltered for the first time all night. "Olivia?" he muttered under his breath. Chanel's perfectly manicured fingers tightened around his arm. "Who the hell is she?" The MC stammered over the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to have." But Olivia cut him off. "I have a court injunction," she said, voice calm, firm, and carried by sheer clarity through the stunned silence. "This wedding cannot legally proceed." Gasps, camera flashes, murmurs erupted like a growing wildfire. Nicholas stepped forward, face pale. "Olivia, what are you doing?" She didn't blink. "You never finalized our divorce, Nicholas, and under New York marital law, you cannot remarry while still legally bound. I'm your wife." She looked down, resting a hand gently over her rounded belly. "And the mother of your child." Chanel's mouth dropped. A collective scream of whispers filled the room. Paparazzi immediately turned their lenses toward Olivia. Security hesitated, unsure what to do. The judge's signature on the injunction was real. The prenup, tucked inside the envelope, was real. And worse, for Nicholas, so was the notarized copy of the marriage license still active. "Security," Nicholas barked, trying to regain control. "Get her out of here." But Olivia stood her ground. "You lay a hand on me," she said coolly, "and I will sue you for assaulting a pregnant woman, your legal wife, in front of 200 witnesses and 6 media outlets." A beat of silence. No one moved. Then someone clapped. It started slowly, deliberately from the back of the ballroom. A man in a dark navy suit stepped forward from the shadows, Lucas Shaw, CEO of Shaw Global Holdings. A corporate titan. A man far wealthier and far more dangerous than Nicholas had ever dared to compete with. And he walked directly to Olivia's side. "Is everything okay, Liv?" Lucas asked, slipping a protective hand around her waist. His eyes locked on Nicholas. She doesn't need to say another word. I've brought a team of lawyers. More flashes. Guests began pulling out phones. Chanel stepped back, horrified. Her carefully constructed image of being the lucky girl who snagged the city's most eligible bachelor was collapsing around her. Nicholas looked like he had been punched in the gut. "Lucas Shaw," he said, stunned. "What are you? Why are you?" "I'm the godfather of her child," Lucas said, his voice dangerously calm. "And I protect what's mine." Olivia didn't speak again. She didn't need to. The entire ballroom had already seen everything they needed to. The cameras, the court order, the belly, and the billionaire now standing protectively beside her. The wedding was over before it began, and the story had only just started. The ballroom had fallen into stunned silence, the kind you only hear after an explosion. But the real blast wasn't Olivia's court injunction. It was the identity she carried behind that calm face and rounded belly, an identity Nicholas had long underestimated. To him, Olivia had been the quiet wife, the placeholder, the one he married for optics when his startup needed an image of stability for investors. What he didn't know, what he never took the time to learn, was who she really was. Before she took Nicholas's last name, Olivia Carter had her own legacy. She was the daughter of Charles and Evelyn Carter, the founders of Carter Global, one of the oldest privately owned family investment firms in the country. Old money. Quiet power. A last name whispered behind closed doors in private equity circles. Olivia had grown up in Connecticut on a sprawling estate with horses, nannies, and private French tutors. But after her parents' tragic plane crash when she was 19, Olivia disappeared from the headlines. Most people assumed she vanished into grief. In truth, she walked away. She didn't want to be known as the orphan heiress. She enrolled in NYU under her mother's maiden name and started over as a scholarship student majoring in social work. She wanted normalcy, real friends, real love. That's when she met Nicholas Graham. He was charming in a used car salesman kind of way, ambitious, witty, and constantly hustling. At the time, he was pitching a beta app for restaurant waitlists that barely worked, crashing on every second refresh. But he had charisma, and he needed a boost. Investors liked stability. They liked married men, men with a supportive partner. Olivia never told him about her inheritance. She let him think she was just a kind-hearted girl from a modest background who believed in him. She paid rent, cooked dinners, edited pitch decks, and poured her trust and silent financial support into his dream. When he proposed, he didn't even buy a ring. Olivia supplied the down payment on their first apartment under the guise of a family loan. She wanted him to feel like he earned it. But once the app blew up and Nicholas secured his first $10 million in VC funding, everything changed. He stopped saying we and started saying me. His meetings went from Starbucks to penthouses. His clothes changed. His tone changed. And slowly, so did his eyes. He looked at Olivia like she was furniture. At first, she thought he was just stressed. Then came the missed dinners, the work trips that never included her, the perfume on his collars that didn't belong to her, the 2 a.m. texts he left face down on the nightstand. Olivia never confronted him, not right away. She was calm, strategic. She called her family's legal team, reactivated her trust, and began documenting everything. She knew how to play the long game. She also knew exactly how to break a narcissist, let him build his tower of lies, then pull out the foundation in front of an audience. The pregnancy was unplanned, but not unwanted. When Olivia found out she was carrying Nicholas's child, she almost left right away. But something told her to wait, to let him show the world his true colors. And tonight, he had. He stood frozen in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by whispers, his trophy fiancée shrinking into the shadows. Chanel, once radiant, now looked like a cautionary tale. Lucas Shaw stood tall beside Olivia, his hand still gently pressed against the small of her back. They'd known each other for years. He had been a mentor to her father, someone she had trusted since she was a teenager. And he had always made one promise. If anyone ever hurts you, Olivia, they'll answer to me. Now it was time to collect. Nicholas tried to speak, his voice cracking. "You're lying. This is some trick." "Trick?" Olivia said softly, her voice deadly calm. "Do you think I want to be here? At your circus of a wedding? You humiliated me, you lied to me, you cheated on me, and I let it all slide until you tried to rewrite the story without me." Security. Nicholas barked again, but no one moved, because Olivia had already spoken to the venue's legal counsel. The injunction was binding. Any attempt to forcibly remove her would result in immediate charges. Lucas reached into his jacket pocket and handed a second envelope to the venue manager. "This is a certified cease and desist," he said. "Should this event continue, every attendee and vendor is liable for participation in a knowingly fraudulent marriage ceremony." The manager paled. We can't proceed," he said, stepping up to Nicholas. "I'm sorry, sir. The event is terminated. Immediately." "You don't get to do this," Nicholas roared. "You can't ruin me like this." But Olivia only gave him a small, almost pitying smile. "I didn't ruin you," she said. "You did that all by yourself." Then she turned, heels clicking, and walked out with Lucas at her side. Paparazzi swarmed, flashbulbs exploding like fireworks. But Olivia didn't flinch. She had done what few women dared. She walked into the lion's den and made the lion kneel. And the world? It was finally watching. The sun rose over Manhattan with an eerie calm that didn't match the chaos brewing beneath. In the penthouses of Fifth Avenue, in the offices of publicists and corporate lawyers, and in the inboxes of magazine editors across the city, one name exploded like a bomb: Nicholas Graham. By 6:47 a.m., the video had gone viral. Someone from the wedding, no one knew who, had recorded the entire thing on their phone. The moment Olivia stepped through those ballroom doors. Her announcement, the court injunction, the look of panic on Nicholas's face, Lucas Shaw standing beside her, Chanel's confusion, the walkout. The video had everything: suspense, betrayal, pregnancy, power, and poetic justice. TikTok had already clipped it into a dozen viral edits, some with dramatic music overlays, others breaking down the symbolism of her black gown or the moment Nicholas knew he was finished. Hashtags like Galagate, Pregnant Wife Revenge, and Nicholas Exposed trended worldwide. By 8 a.m., 3 different morning shows had run the footage. The Daily Report called it the social event of the year, turned public takedown. Fashion blogs analyzed Chanel's gown next to Olivia's with brutal clarity. One headline read, "How to Wear Power Without Sequins." Nicholas's PR team scrambled, but the damage was done. Olivia, meanwhile, sat in a quiet townhouse on the Upper East Side, wrapped in a soft robe, sipping decaf tea. Her phone buzzed non-stop. She ignored most of it. Her lawyer handled the statements. Her family's security team filtered threats and media inquiries. She simply watched. Across from her sat Lucas, scrolling through his tablet with clinical precision. "You've just dethroned one of the most worshipped tech moguls in America," he said. "How do you feel?" Olivia glanced at her belly. The baby kicked gently. "Relieved," she replied. Lucas smiled. "There's something poetic about it. He built his empire on deception and a woman's silence. And now, silence is exactly what's going to destroy him." She nodded, but her heart wasn't dancing with victory. Not yet, because the next part of her plan was only beginning. Across town, Nicholas sat in his penthouse, shirtless, hungover from a bottle of whiskey he'd downed after the disaster. His phone lit up with angry investor messages. "Do you realize the liability you've created?" one text read. Another, "Sponsors are pulling out. Your face is poison." Chanel had stormed out at 3 a.m. after finding out the prenup she'd signed was meaningless. He was already married. The wedding photos were unusable. Her brand collaborations had dropped overnight. Her Instagram followers turned on her like wolves, accusing her of home-wrecking with glitter and lies. Nicholas tried to call Olivia. She didn't pick up. He tried again and again. Eventually, he sent a voice message, his tone trembling between rage and desperation. "Olivia, please, let's talk. You didn't have to do it like that. You embarrassed me, in front of everyone. I made mistakes, okay? But we were over. You knew we were over." She listened to the message, then deleted it. By noon, Olivia met with her attorneys and presented the next phase of her counterattack. She was filing for full custody of the child and launching a claim for fraudulent asset concealment, based on the fact that Nicholas had funneled millions from their marital estate into private holdings registered under shell companies after she became pregnant. Lucas's lawyers had tracked it all. Every transfer, every offshore account. "You tried to erase me," Olivia whispered to herself. "Now I'll erase you from your own empire." Nicholas finally received a formal summons by 3 p.m. Served at his office in front of his staff, cameras catching the moment as he stormed out, slamming the door. His face was everywhere. but not the way he wanted. That night, Olivia met with someone she hadn't seen in a long time, her childhood friend, Claire Westfield, now a high-powered brand strategist. "I want to go public," Olivia said, surprising even herself. Claire raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" "Yes," she replied. "But on my terms. I want to tell my side. I'm tired of being someone's footnote." Claire leaned forward. "Then we start now. We control the narrative. We don't react, we lead." They spent hours plotting the rollout. A personal essay in Vogue, an exclusive interview with 60 Minutes, a foundation launch in her mother's name to support women navigating toxic marriages. This wouldn't just be revenge, it would be reinvention. The next morning, Olivia stepped out of a black SUV and into the studio of a top-tier photographer. The magazine spread would feature her not as Nicholas Graham's betrayed wife, but as Olivia Carter, the heiress who returned with purpose. The transformation was about to begin. Just 72 hours ago, Chanel Monroe had been the toast of Manhattan. She was the woman who had won Nicholas Graham, the tech mogul, the billionaire bachelor, the man every Fashion Week darling secretly dreamed of capturing. She had nearly 12 million followers across platforms, a brand deal with a luxury fragrance line, and an exclusive capsule collection in the works with a Parisian label. She had walked into the East Haven estate believing she would walk out with a new last name and a new level of fame. Instead, she walked out a cautionary tale. And now, 3 days later, Chanel sat in her high-rise condo with blackout curtains drawn, nursing her 5th iced coffee of the morning as she scrolled through a relentless wave of social media destruction. Her face was everywhere. For all the wrong reasons. The side piece who stole nothing. Chanel Monroe. From runway to runaway. She wore white to a fraudulent wedding. The internet was unforgiving. Her follower count had dropped by nearly 800,000. Brands issued public statements distancing themselves. Her perfume campaign had been pulled before launch. Her stylist stopped returning calls. Her publicist quit. Worst of all, Chanel had no answers. She didn't even know Nicholas was still married. He said the divorce was final, she whispered to herself. Voice cracking. He swore it. But no one cared about what she believed. The world had already decided she was either complicit or stupid. And either way, not worth following. Her phone buzzed with another notification. Olivia Carter exclusive. Why I walked into that wedding pregnant and unbothered. A Vogue cover. Chanel opened it despite herself. The headline was paired with a powerful portrait. Olivia seated gracefully in a modern chair, her hand resting on her pregnant belly, her eyes calm but fierce. The article was beautifully written, detailing Olivia's silence, betrayal, and choice to take control. It painted her as resilient, elegant, and strategic. Chanel threw her phone across the room. It hit a velvet pillow and bounced onto the floor. "How is she winning?" she said out loud, voice trembling. "I was supposed to be the one." Across town, her manager Serena finally returned her call, but the news wasn't good. "Chanel, listen. We need to get in front of this. Damage control. You've been quiet too long." Chanel sniffled. "What am I supposed to say? That I didn't know my fiancé had a wife and a baby on the way?" "Yes," Serena said, bluntly, "because if you don't speak, they'll define you. I'm not going to cry on some morning show. No one's asking you to cry, but you need to remind people who you are. Your brand is collapsing. If you don't salvage it, you're done." Chanel hung up. She knew Serena was right. But Chanel wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to admit that her entire image had been built on lies Nicholas whispered in hotel rooms. She wasn't ready to face the truth. She had been used, not just by Nicholas, but by the entire world that taught her to value attention more than substance. That told her if she looked perfect, she'd be safe. That if she stood next to power, she'd become powerful. But now, she had no wedding, no ring, no career, just silence. Later that night, Chanel finally left the apartment, bundled in an oversized coat and dark sunglasses. She walked into the back entrance of a media studio for a pre-recorded interview. The set was minimal, intimate, just her and one journalist. She sat in the chair. The lights warmed her face. Her hands trembled. And for once, she didn't perform. "I didn't know," she said softly. "I was in love with a man who lied to both of us, to all of us." The interview was raw, messy, honest. She spoke of the whirlwind romance, the promises, the nights she believed in a future that was never real. She even admitted her own naivety. "I should have asked more questions," she said. "But I didn't want the truth. I wanted the dream." It aired the next morning and went viral within hours. Some people mocked her, but others saw something else. Not the villain. Not the homewrecker. Just a girl who got played by the same man who played everyone else. The tides shifted, just slightly. A few brands paused their cancellations. A mental health nonprofit reached out, asking if she'd speak at an event about emotional manipulation and public shame. A producer pitched a docuseries about power, image, and recovery. The cracks in Chanel Monroe's empire had become wounds. But wounds could heal. And as she watched herself speak honestly on screen, for the first time without filters or curated lighting, Chanel whispered a single sentence to herself: "I'm not done yet." By the time Monday morning arrived, Nicholas Graham's empire was already crumbling. What had taken 7 years to build was now unraveling in a matter of hours. His public image, once polished and invincible, had become a meme. His face plastered across gossip sites with captions like, "From tech king to tabloid clown." But the headlines weren't the worst part. The worst part was the call he received from the Graham Tech Board of Directors. They wanted an emergency meeting. At 9 a.m., no press, no lawyers, just him alone facing the consequences. Nicholas arrived at the company's glass headquarters in Midtown, his usual swagger replaced by forced calm. He wore his favorite navy suit, the one he always wore to investor presentations, but it felt too tight today, like the walls themselves were pressing in on him. He stepped into the executive boardroom. 10 pairs of eyes stared back at him, stone cold, unmoving. The room was silent. Then Gerald Laskin, the board chairman, leaned forward and said it. "You've become a liability." Nicholas opened his mouth to defend himself, but Laskin raised a hand. "You don't speak yet," he said. "You listen." Over the next 20 minutes, they presented numbers. Cold, brutal facts. Stock value had dropped 13% in 3 days. Investors were panicking. Major sponsors were backing out of projects tied to Nicholas's personal brand. Corporate partnerships were in jeopardy. But what sealed his fate wasn't the scandal itself. It was what Olivia had done next. "She filed a lawsuit this morning," Laskin said flatly, tossing a file onto the table. "She claims Graham Tech was partially funded with joint marital assets, and if that's proven true, the company could be considered community property." Nicholas paled. "She's bluffing," he muttered. "She's not," said Rachel Kim, another board member. Her legal team submitted detailed documentation tracing initial seed capital from a Carter family trust. That's her trust, her money, used before any external funding rounds. "She gave you the rope," Laskin said, "and you built your own noose." Nicholas stood. "You're overreacting. We're still operational. You're being removed," Laskin interrupted. "Effective immediately. You'll retain your shares pending litigation. But your CEO privileges, voting authority, and executive decision-making power are suspended." Nicholas slammed his hand on the table. "You can't do that." "We just did," Rachel replied. The room remained calm as security escorted Nicholas out the back entrance. There were no cheers, no sympathy, just silence. He walked through the parking lot in a daze. The skyscrapers no longer looked like triumphs. They looked like tombstones. And his name was already being scraped off the plaque outside the building. Later that afternoon, a press release confirmed it. Nicholas Graham steps down amid legal controversy. Except he didn't step down, he was pushed. Meanwhile, Olivia sat across town in a private conference room, reviewing merger documents. Carter Global was quietly acquiring a majority stake in an up-and-coming fintech startup, a company Nicholas once tried to buy but couldn't afford without dipping into Olivia's trust. Now, she was the one acquiring it. Poetic. Lucas Shaw sat beside her, sipping espresso. "Heard you dethroned a king this morning," he said. "I didn't dethrone him," Olivia replied, eyes on the contract. "I just reminded everyone he never wore a crown." She signed the papers and passed them to her legal counsel. Then she looked at her phone. A notification blinked on the screen. Nicholas Graham officially removed from Graham Tech. She didn't smile? Not yet. Because she knew Nicholas wouldn't disappear quietly, and she was right. Hours later, Olivia's lawyer received a letter. Nicholas was petitioning for partial custody of the child. It was a predictable move, not born from love, but from ego, a desperate grasp at relevance. Olivia didn't flinch. Instead, she contacted a former judge-turned-custody consultant, someone who specialized in high-profile, high-conflict parenting cases. Her team would be ready. This wasn't about pettiness, it was about protection. And Olivia would protect her child from the circus Nicholas was trying to turn their lives into. That night, Olivia sat alone on the terrace of her townhouse, wrapped in a shawl. The city lights shimmered below, indifferent to the war unfolding above them. She rested her hands on her belly. "You're safe," she whispered. "I promise you that." In another part of the city, Nicholas drank alone in a bar he used to own a stake in. No one offered him free drinks anymore. No one asked for autographs. And for the first time in years, Nicholas Graham was just a man with nothing left but regrets and broken glass. Nicholas Graham had once believed the world revolved around him. Now it barely acknowledged his existence. In just over a week, his name had become toxic. He could no longer walk into his favorite restaurants without whispers. His former friends, those who toasted champagne on his yacht, had gone ghost. No one wanted to be associated with a man who had not only been exposed as a liar and a cheater, but also removed from his own company by the woman he tried to discard. Nicholas paced his penthouse, disheveled and unshaven, ignoring the blinking voicemail notifications piling up on his phone. His attorney had warned him. "She's not bluffing, Nick. Her legal team is relentless. That prenup you made her sign back when you thought she was a nobody? It's invalid. Fraudulent execution, plus the Carter Trust documentation is airtight. She's going to bury you." He fired the attorney 2 days ago, but deep down he knew the man was right. Olivia had always been quiet, sweet, supportive. But she wasn't weak, and he should have known the woman who once sat through board meetings silently observing the room wasn't just playing the part. She had been studying, calculating, waiting. Now she was everywhere, on newsstands, talk shows, finance panels. She wasn't milking the scandal for fame. She was using the attention to relaunch herself as a powerful figure in business and women's empowerment. The Carter Foundation was now front-page news. Its mission, to support women trapped in financial dependence inside toxic marriages. Donations flooded in. Olivia declined interviews about Nicholas specifically, always redirecting the conversation back to impact and integrity. But her silence spoke louder than any accusation. And that infuriated Nicholas the most. He scrolled angrily through his social feed, stopping at a photo from the gala debacle now etched into cultural history. There she was, standing beside Lucas Shaw, pregnant, powerful, untouched. She hadn't just left him. She had replaced him. That thought haunted him. Desperate to reclaim control, Nicholas turned his focus to the custody battle. He began working with a crisis PR consultant, someone who advised disgraced executives. Their strategy: appear rehabilitated, remorseful, reformed. Nicholas shaved, cleaned up, donated to a few children's charities. Posted a photo holding a baby cousin with the caption, "Family is everything. #new chapter." But the internet wasn't buying it. His comments were flooded with, "You mean the family you tried to pretend didn't exist? Go be a father instead of faking it on Instagram." Olivia really dodged a bullet. Meanwhile, Olivia continued building. She purchased a penthouse in the same building where Graham Tech's new CEO now lived. Not out of pettiness, but because the building was secure, quiet, and close to the best pediatrician in the city. It was symbolic, too. The world Nicholas once claimed was no longer his. One afternoon, Olivia walked into a cafe near Central Park, wearing a soft camel coat and sunglasses. She ordered an herbal tea and sat quietly, checking her emails. She didn't expect to be recognized, but people noticed. 2 women at a corner table whispered and smiled at her. "Are you?" one asked. Olivia looked up, then simply nodded. The woman smiled wide. "You're incredible. What you did, walking into that room? That took guts. Thank you for standing up for women like us." Olivia smiled back, a little caught off guard. "Thank you," she said softly. "That means a lot." As she walked out, she felt something shift inside her. For so long, she had lived in Nicholas's shadow. Now, strangers were thanking her for stepping into her own light. She wasn't just fighting for her child or herself anymore. She was representing something bigger. But Nicholas wasn't done. One rainy evening, just as Olivia was arriving home, her assistant rushed to her side. "There's a video," she said breathlessly. "He posted it an hour ago. You need to see this." Olivia's heart thudded. She sat down and opened the video link. Nicholas appeared on screen, seated in a dimly lit room, wearing a gray sweater and a vulnerable expression. Piano music played faintly in the background. "I've made mistakes," he began. "I've hurt people. I've let ego blind me to what matters. But I love my unborn child, and I want to be part of their life." He looked into the camera. "Olivia, if you're watching this, please let me be a father. Not for me, for them." The video had racked up 2 million views. Some called it manipulative. Others praised his courage. His PR team was clearly trying to spin redemption. But Olivia saw it for what it was, a last-ditch performance. She closed the video and looked at her reflection in the window. Her face was calm. Unshaken, she turned to her assistant. "Call the attorneys," she said. "I want supervised visitation only, no negotiations." She paused, then added, "And we'll start prenatal therapy. I want my child to grow up understanding boundaries, even before they can speak." That night, Olivia lay in bed, her hand on her belly, feeling the baby kick. Nicholas could try every trick in the book, but she was already 10 chapters ahead. Nicholas Graham thought he had faced every possible twist: the viral humiliation, the loss of his company, the collapse of his public image, the custody battle spiraling out of control. Every power play he tried to mount was crushed beneath the weight of Olivia's calm precision. But he still didn't know the full story. He didn't know what Olivia had hidden, not from malice, but from mercy. And he was about to find out. It started with a single envelope, delivered by hand. No return address. Inside, a letter and a photo. The letter was on crisp cream paper, the handwriting elegant, unmistakably Olivia's. The photo was older, faded slightly at the corners. A much younger Olivia, no more than 20, standing beside an elderly man in a hospital room. He was frail but smiling. The man looked familiar, but Nicholas couldn't place him. He read the letter. "Nicholas, you never asked who I really was. You were so quick to decide I was small. Just a bookstore girl with a kind heart and a quiet voice. But you never asked where that voice came from. Let me tell you now." The rest of the letter unfolded like a slow, deliberate storm. Olivia had spent her early college years volunteering at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Not for credit, not for resume building, but for one patient, her grandfather, Elias Carter, the founder of Carter Global, a legend in investment circles, the man who built one of the most discreet yet powerful financial dynasties in American history. A man who'd gone mostly off-grid after retiring in the early 2000s. Few photos existed. Most people assumed he had passed quietly years ago, but Elias had lived long enough to teach Olivia everything he knew. "While you were pitching dating apps to frat boys," Olivia wrote, "I was sitting across from a man who negotiated billion-dollar treaties without blinking, who showed me how to read balance sheets like novels, how to hold power without raising your voice." She went on to explain how Elias, in his final year, entrusted her with his private holdings, a collection of assets not even publicly linked to the Carter family name. Because she wasn't just an heiress. She was the executor. Nicholas dropped the letter. He stared at the photo again, now recognizing the eyes. Olivia had Elias's eyes, quiet but watchful. Unmoving even under pressure. She had been playing chess while he was bragging about checkers. His phone buzzed with a call from his new legal team. He didn't answer. Instead, he opened his laptop and did a deep search on Carter Global's recent activity. That's when he saw it. A new holding company, Ashen Ridge Capital, had just acquired 3 of Graham Tech's most critical third-party vendors. Ashen Ridge's founder? Olivia Carter. Nicholas slumped in his chair. She wasn't just pulling away from his orbit, she was dismantling it from the outside. And he never saw her coming. Across the city, Olivia sat in her private office, watching the stock tickers scroll across the screen. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply nodded when the acquisition finalized. Lucas Shaw stepped into the room with 2 coffees. "You ready for what's next?" he asked. She looked at him. "He knows now." Lucas smirked. "Let me guess, he's spiraling?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Lucas handed her a folder. Inside were strategic outlines for expanding the Carter Foundation into global markets, education programs, microloans for women in crisis, prenatal health resources in underserved communities. "I don't want to just destroy what he built," Olivia said. "I want to replace it with something better." Lucas raised his cup. "To better." Later that night, as the city buzzed beneath the stars, Olivia sat on her balcony, the baby moving gently under her palm. The skyline looked different now. Not threatening, but full of promise. Nicholas once held this city in the palm of his hand. Now? She was the one everyone watched. And she wasn't done yet. It had been 57 days since Olivia Carter walked into her estranged husband's wedding and turned the most glamorous event of the season into a national spectacle. 57 days since the world gasped. Since Nicholas Graham's empire cracked. Since a pregnant woman in black proved that quiet power was the deadliest kind. But Olivia didn't stop at revenge. She transformed. Her makeover wasn't just physical, though the media obsessed over it. Gone were the thrift store sweaters and secondhand shoes Nicholas used to ridicule. In their place, structured suits in ivory, navy, and emerald, custom-tailored by eco-conscious designers. She wore clean lines and bold statements, her pregnancy never hidden, but embraced as part of her armor. Fashion magazines couldn't get enough of her. Harper's Bazaar called her the new face of executive femininity. Time named her Woman of the Month, not for the scandal, but for what she did after. Because Olivia wasn't interested in being a trending headline, she was rewriting the rules. Every day, she reported to the Carter Global Building, not as a token heiress, but as managing partner of Ashen Ridge Capital. She led board meetings, negotiated international acquisitions, and launched a mentorship initiative for young women in finance. The top floor of her building now housed the Ascend Initiative, a program connecting formerly abused or silenced women with careers in law, business, and medicine. She didn't just walk away from Nicholas. She walked into something greater. Across the city, people couldn't stop talking about her. At power lunches, corporate retreats, and TED conferences, one name kept resurfacing. Olivia Carter. Did you see her speech at Columbia? She's launching a maternal health clinic in Nairobi next month. She's not just reclaiming her story, she's re-engineering what resilience looks like. Meanwhile, Nicholas had faded. His followers dipped below 1 million. His name was tied to legal battles and unpaid settlements. No one invited him to events anymore. His investor contacts no longer replied. Even Chanel Monroe, after her emotional interview, had moved on, signing a deal to host a docuseries on reclaiming identity after toxic love. Nicholas watched from the sidelines, bitter and irrelevant. But Olivia, she never even looked back. One Friday morning, she walked into the Carter Global Penthouse for a keynote presentation. It was a media summit on ethical finance and generational wealth, attended by CEOs, politicians, and celebrities. Her speech was live-streamed to over 4 million viewers. She stood tall at the podium in a scarlet pantsuit, her hair pinned in a soft twist, one hand gently resting on her round belly. Her voice was steady, controlled. Women are expected to be quiet when betrayed, she began. We're told to forgive quickly, to avoid embarrassment for our sake or for theirs. But silence doesn't heal. It protects the wrong people. The room went still. I stayed silent for years, she continued, until the moment came when silence was no longer survival. It was complicity. So I spoke. I walked into a ballroom where I was never invited to speak, and I took up space. Applause. Her speech lasted 18 minutes. By the end, several audience members were in tears. The clip went viral within the hour, not because it was dramatic, but because it was deliberate, powerful. A woman who had once been discarded had now become a mirror, reflecting back the quiet strength too many women buried to keep the peace. And after the summit, something unexpected happened. A young intern approached Olivia outside the venue, nervous, shaking slightly. "Miss Carter," she said, "I'm sorry, but I have to tell you, I left my fiancé last month because of you." Olivia blinked. The girl continued, "I saw that video, the way you stood up, and I realized I was staying quiet in a situation that was killing me. You gave me a picture of what it looks like to leave." Tears welled up in the girl's eyes. "Thank you." Olivia pulled her into a gentle hug. "You didn't leave because of me," she said. "You left because you remembered who you are." That moment stayed with her, more than any interview or article. Because for all the headlines and magazine spreads, this was what mattered most. Not just Olivia's rise, but the rise of others through her. That evening, Olivia returned home to the penthouse, her home now, entirely her own. She slipped off her heels and sank into her favorite armchair by the window, the cityscape glowing like a constellation of quiet dreams. She was due in 5 weeks. She had already prepared the nursery. Neutral tones, natural light, no gold nameplates or CEO in training signs. Just calm, softness, safety. Everything she never had with Nicholas. Her phone buzzed. It was Lucas. "You know the rumor going around?" "Which one?" "That you're going to be president someday." She laughed softly and texted back, "One revolution at a time." Then she closed her eyes and rested her hands on her belly. This wasn't the life Nicholas planned for her. It was the life he never believed she was capable of creating, which made it all the more beautiful. It had been exactly 3 months since Olivia Carter stepped into that infamous ballroom and stopped a wedding with nothing but her presence and a court order. Now, she was returning to another ballroom, but this time as the guest of honor. The Women of Impact Gala was one of the most prestigious events of the year. Hosted at the Grand Solstice Hotel in Uptown Manhattan, it celebrated leaders who had redefined power, purpose, and social change. Olivia wasn't just attending, she was receiving the Legacy Award. But that wasn't the twist. Nicholas Graham would be there too. The board of a nonprofit he once donated to had invited him months ago, long before the scandal. And while many expected him to cancel, Nicholas, ever the strategist, saw this as a chance to reintroduce himself. His publicist teased a redemption arc. Whispers swirled that he'd be walking the red carpet with a mystery woman. But no one could have anticipated what actually happened that night. The venue was a dream of glass and gold. Camera crews lined the entrance. Reporters called it the Met Gala for Minds. Olivia arrived fashionably late, and when she stepped out of the car, the entire world seemed to freeze. She wore a custom black velvet gown with a deep emerald cape draped over her shoulders. Her baby bump, now only weeks from delivery, was wrapped in silk and strength. Her diamond earrings were heirlooms from her grandmother. Her heels, designed by a survivor of domestic abuse and funded by the Ascend Initiative. She didn't just look powerful, she looked untouchable. Lucas Shaw escorted her down the carpet. Cameras clicked nonstop. One reporter whispered, "She's not here for revenge, she's here for history." Meanwhile, inside the gala, Nicholas stood stiff near the back wall. His tuxedo was perfect, but his smile was hollow. The mystery date never showed. And the moment Olivia entered, every head turned, including his. She walked past him without so much as a glance, and that hurt more than any headline. The program began shortly after. Celebrities, CEOs, authors, and activists spoke of justice, transformation, and dignity. But it was the final segment that stole the night. The host stepped onto the stage. "Tonight, we honor a woman who turned personal tragedy into global change. A woman who reminded the world that dignity doesn't whisper, it roars." Applause erupted. "Please welcome Olivia Carter." She walked to the stage slowly, every movement deliberate. Then she stood beneath the golden lights and spoke into the silence. "I was once told," she began, "that the best revenge is success. But I don't believe in revenge. I believe in reclamation." The audience leaned in. "For years, I lived quietly in someone else's story. I let my light dim so his could shine. I thought love meant loyalty, even to my own pain." She paused, her eyes didn't waver. "But then came the day I realized I wasn't the villain for leaving. I wasn't the problem for speaking. I wasn't hysterical, or hormonal, or bitter. I was just done being small." Applause burst again. Olivia continued. "Tonight isn't about what was taken from me. It's about what I took back. My voice, my legacy, my motherhood, and my future." Tears shimmered in a dozen eyes. As she stepped down from the stage, Nicholas remained rooted in place. He tried to speak to her during intermission, forcing a smile. "Olivia," he said, his voice hoarse. "That was powerful." She turned slowly, locking eyes with him. "Yes," she replied, "and peaceful." He blinked. "Peaceful?" "I used to fantasize about revenge," she said. "But now, I just want peace. You're not my story anymore, Nicholas. You're just a paragraph I had to rewrite." Before he could respond, she walked away again. Only this time, the whole room watched her leave, and no one followed him. Later that night, at the gala's private after-party, a young journalist approached Olivia. "Can I ask you something off the record?" she said. "What was the moment you knew it was over?" Olivia thought for a second. "It wasn't the cheating," she said. "It wasn't even the wedding." The journalist tilted her head. "Then what?" "It was the silence after," Olivia answered. "The moment I realized I didn't miss him. Not his voice, not his presence, nothing. That's when I knew I'd already left. The journalist blinked, stunned, and Olivia smiled just faintly. She wasn't celebrating victory over someone. She was celebrating freedom from them. Spring arrived in New York City not with loud fanfare, but with quiet promises. Trees bloomed shyly along the avenues. The wind grew softer. And in a private maternity suite at St. Eden's Hospital, Olivia Carter held her newborn child for the very first time. A baby girl. She was tiny but fierce, born with her mother's eyes and a grip that surprised even the nurse. "She's already strong," the nurse whispered with a smile. Olivia looked down at her daughter and whispered back, "She had to be." There were no photographers, no press, just peace. The world didn't need to know the exact moment this child came into the world. Olivia had kept that part sacred, away from the cameras and courtrooms, the lawsuits and headlines. This moment was hers. The birth certificate lay on the table beside her. The nurse waited politely, pen in hand. "What's her name?" she asked. Olivia paused. She thought of everything that came before this. The betrayal, the humiliation, the courtroom battles, the threats, the apologies that came too late, the love she once believed in, the man who tried to erase her, the man who never thought she'd stand. And then she thought of everything that came after. The foundation, the women she helped, the girls who emailed her late at night saying, "I left because you did." The little wins, the big transformations. And this child, this living reminder that sometimes the most painful endings create the most powerful beginnings. She looked at the nurse and said clearly, "Her name is Solène Grace Carter." No hyphen, no father's name, just her own. A name rooted in legacy and rebirth. "She's mine," Olivia said softly, signing the form, "and she will know exactly who she comes from." A few days later, Olivia left the hospital quietly, carrying Solène in her arms. Lucas met her outside, car door open, smile wide. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready," Olivia replied, buckling her daughter in. They drove to her townhouse. On the way, Olivia looked out the window and realized, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't carrying the weight of survival. She was carrying power, life, purpose. That week, a photo surfaced online. Olivia in a white button-down shirt and no makeup, holding her baby at home, smiling. No press release, no captions. But the internet noticed anyway, and the comments weren't about drama anymore. They were about growth, healing, power. She did it her way. She's the blueprint. She left and rebuilt. Nicholas never contested custody again. After the gala, his PR team dropped him. His lawyers advised against pushing further. And though he would always have limited visitation rights, he eventually faded into the background of Olivia's life, just as she intended. He never met Solène, because Olivia had made her peace, not just with him, but with the version of herself who once begged for love she didn't need. Months passed. Then, on a quiet summer evening, Olivia stood before a packed audience at Columbia University, delivering a commencement speech that would go viral for years. She wore a soft cream dress, Solène now 6 months old, waiting backstage with Lucas and a trusted nanny. Olivia's words echoed through the auditorium. "There will be people who try to define you by your silence, by what you didn't fight for, by what you let go of because it wasn't worth the battle. But hear me. Your peace is not weakness. Your stillness is not surrender." She paused. "I left a man who didn't see me. I walked away from a love that tried to shrink me, and I stood alone, carrying both a child and a story that the world told me was shameful." The crowd leaned in. "But I learned something no one teaches you in fairy tales. You don't need a happy ending with someone else. You just need a beginning with yourself." Thunderous applause. That clip would circulate online for years. Taught in classes, quoted in books, used in voiceovers for videos of women walking away from pain and into their power. And yet for Olivia, the real joy wasn't in speeches or articles. It was in the everyday. In watching Solène giggle as sunlight danced across her crib, in sipping coffee on her terrace before dawn, in leading board meetings where her voice wasn't interrupted anymore. One afternoon, she received a letter. No return address, no signature, just a simple note. "You didn't just win, you rewrote the entire game, N." She folded it once and placed it in a drawer, not because she needed to remember him, but because it reminded her of who she used to be and who she'd never be again. That night, she held Solène in her arms and whispered, "You'll never have to earn love. It will find you freely, just like you found me." She kissed her daughter's forehead and sang softly. The past had been loud, but her future? It was full of grace. So the story has ended, our wonderful friends. Are you still here, even now? If you are, then maybe, just maybe, something in Olivia's journey touched your heart. Because this wasn't just a tale about betrayal and power. It was about rising from silence, about the strength it takes to walk away from what breaks you and into what rebuilds you. Olivia didn't just stop a wedding. She reclaimed her voice, her future, and her peace. And in doing so, she gave every woman watching a new blueprint. You don't need revenge. You need remembrance of who you are and what you deserve. As one quote from Heterodox Healing says, sometimes the deepest healing comes not from fixing, but from finally letting go. If this story stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Comment your thoughts below. Tell us what part hit you the hardest. Like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. Let's keep building a community where stories like Olivia's aren't rare. They're reminders.